we've been, talking with you a lot about it before, how hard in the last year it was for all of us trying to verify sources, trying to find out actual facts on the ground, because Ukraine, Russia is basically the biggest epicenter of the biggest media warfare happening at the time. So is it getting worse or better?
I think it's getting different. I think that so a few things are happening simultaneously. One is that when you talk about what was going on in Donbass, when it first happened, when tanks first showed up, a lot of citizens look out their window for the first time, and Ukraine is a very peaceful country, and oh my God, that's a tank, that's a missile launcher, and they took photos and they took videos and they talked about it. And what happened in the Donbass is a few things simultaneously. People got scared to talk because there was a lot of pressure put on them by the occupying separatists and Russian-backed forces. The internet got worse. A lot of these places, the infrastructure has really been very seriously impacted. So a lot of people don't have internet, so those things are drying up. And then, as we know, there's plenty of journalists who are at this event in Kiev right now, who have been in the country, who have been kicked out of the Donbass, who have been beaten or detained, arrested, harassed, and told not to come back.
Actually, when it comes to citizen journalism, right, which is kind of recent development, and people in many newsrooms heavily rely on that kind of journalism in recent years. But when it comes to Eastern Ukraine, you talk to people there on the ground. 1 second they say one thing, and the other second they say absolutely different, just because of out of fear.
Yeah. So what's interesting is Novaya Gazeta, the Russian independent newspaper. This is one example. They sent reporters to two towns in eastern Ukraine near the MH17 Malaysian Airlines crash site, and one area was where they thought the missile was fired from, and the other one is from where the Russians say the missile was fired from. And in general, they found that people were very afraid to talk, and they had to interview a lot of people because most people wouldn't go on record, and people who did go on record say, "Oh, please don't use my name," or things of this nature. And so you have to figure that that's just one example in two towns, but they were both similar experiences in both places. So people are afraid, I think, and so it's gotten even harder. And for a while, it was great, and in the sense that it was easier to verify things that were happening because so many people were posting the same things. And from maybe like different locations. So like, oh, I saw this vehicle driving, and then someone else down the road would say the same thing.
Especially was the case with MH17, right?
Absolutely.
We know about this launching Buka card just because of citizen journalism, if you can call it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But there were also traditional journalists sort of crawling all over the area, and they were able to go there. But what happened was, I think because of MH17, because of all that Russia looked so bad after that, I think that there was a real crackdown. And so now it's very, very difficult. I think things are murkier. There's fewer foreign correspondents. There's only isolated citizen journalist reports. So you have one video now of a convoy or tanks moving, and one video is very hard to verify because there's nothing to check it against.
Very briefly, I think we have the right to criticize our own colleagues and media. And if to briefly to answer the question, what was the biggest media failure on behalf of our newsrooms when it comes to covering the crisis in the last year, because there is so much criticism, right, of characterized coverage or just negative coverage.
What's happening maybe now actually is that now that the attention is off the war, we need to focus on what's going on inside the Ukrainian government. Is the Ukrainian government reforming? And what we find is there's very negative stories and there's very positive stories, but there's not a lot of real stories. There's
Or
not
investigative
stories telling us both sides, telling us the truth. You have a lot of people with an agenda who, anti-Ukrainian government for many reasons. Maybe they're pro-Russian, but also maybe they just think reform isn't happening enough.
Maybe there's just a tradition to be negative about Ukraine coverage.
It could be, but and then you have on the other side you have people who are very afraid that they'll somehow ruin Ukraine's image in the world if they report on these negative stories.
And go for self-censorship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so they don't talk about some of these things, and some of these stories have been around for a long time. Corruption and things. So they're not big headlines, but actually they are, because now is the time that Ukraine is supposed to be doing something about corruption. So we hope to see more coverage of how those efforts are going, both positive and negative, success stories and failures, and that's the only way things are going to change.